Welcome back, everyone, dear speakers, panelists, dear facilitator. Welcome, Tara. While we wait for people to log on, I would like to welcome everyone, and I would like to quickly go through the housekeeping. As always, we ask you to mute yourself unless you're speaking. The session is being recorded. And then please use the Q&A feature to ask questions. So there's a Q&A function which you should use to ask a specific question to the panelists. If you have a comment, then please use the chat function and make sure that you address it to everyone. Otherwise, not everyone can read it. If you put a comment in the Q&A, only the panelists can read it and not the entire audience. And if you have any technical problems, please message the MIN executive team in the chat. Now, welcome back to the session on quality index, which is really a good follow-up on the previous session where we discussed different schemes in India and Uganda, and we discussed an overview and the results from a stock-taking study on agriculture and insurance. And one question that came up is, how do you ensure the quality of the index, which is now the perfect bridge to that next session. So thank you very much, Tara Chu, Associate Director from Feed the Future Innovation Lab for Markets, Risk and Resilience in the UC Davis in the United States. Thank you for facilitating, moderating that session. I know time difference wise, that is a big challenge, but that's the challenge of an online conference that we're covering the globe, and it's a big opportunity. So the microphone is yours. Thank you very much for everyone for joining.
Thanks so much for the introduction, and thanks for the disclaimer about my time zone issues. It is about 2 in the morning here, so if people can give me a little bit of grace if I stumble over words here or there, it would be greatly appreciated. So I'm going to go ahead and just introduce some of the concepts that we've been working on at the Innovation Lab at University of California, Davis, in partnership with a lot of different collaborators. And I'm going to be providing just an overview of some of the issues and some of the work we've been doing in this area before handing it over to our panelists, who I will let introduce themselves as they join in to offer their unique perspectives on the work they're doing and the role quality and quality certification might have in their work. So first, we have a lot of persistent challenges we always hear about, particularly in the context of agricultural insurance. We hear a lot about financial literacy issues, marketing, farmer trust in products and institutions. There's frequently discussion of high costs, which sometimes can be correlated also concurrently with low value for these costs. And as it sounds like was talked about in the prior session, poor product performance and the ability to detect losses can also be an issue and a barrier to success in scaling. We've seen a lot of really great innovations in marketing and distribution, but some of the fundamental issues when it comes to demand, uptake, and impacts of agricultural insurance aren't really addressed by these key constraints. So for example, this cartoon is being used in Kenya to try to explain how a product is intended to work, but materials such as this aren't effective at communicating and assuring potential clients if it will work as intended and provide the value for the money they will be investing in a product. So the challenges to index insurance in particular are that it has hidden traits that limit the farmer's ability to detect the quality. And looking at an insurance contract in front of them, it's impossible for farmers to really know the product quality and value simply by looking at the contract materials. There's asymmetric information between the people who design and sell the products and farmers, which may limit demand. Without credible information on these hidden traits, farmers might remain suspicious of the quality, and that might cause demand to remain low. Payouts may increase sales, which require sales as a precondition. So it can be quite a frustrating circle that payouts can lead to sales. Sales increase with payouts, but that doesn't always work quite as effectively as we would hope to see. Agricultural insurance can take a long time to provide learning opportunities, especially experiential learning opportunities like observing sales or experiencing sales. For new technologies where the benefits come irregularly, perhaps every few years, it can take a long time for consumers to really become convinced of the quality, which implies that demand will emerge quite slowly if experience is relied upon too much as a sales mechanism. So one of the things I want to discuss and focus on with our panelists is a common stake in quality. Obviously, farmers have a high stake in quality. If products fail to protect farmers in a bad situation, the bad situation is made worse. Not only have they experienced the losses from the shock, but they're also out the premium when they already have scarce resources. Also, it's worth noting that false positives can have negative impacts on the farmers. False positives can frequently increase the premiums and price farmers out of the market. So while on some level, we would be inclined to say farmers benefit from getting money when they don't need it, that's actually not the case in the bigger picture of trying to build this market and make products accessible to farmers. False positives also have negative impacts. But right now, for customers,
interrupt. Okay, yeah, we weren't seeing your slides move.
Oh, well, that's fun. So you can't see now?
Now we see the slide not in full screen mode, but it says farmers now. We're not on the entry slide anymore.
Okay, let me see if I can try something else. Okay. So it looks like the Min team took over, but we're still seeing it not in full mode. There we go. So thank you. So farmers have no reliable independent indicators of safety. And one of the things that's frequently done to try to help customers better understand the product is to simplify the product design, which also has a potential to lower the value for clients, which is a risk. Farmers are averse to the possibility of a shock combined with the risk of product failure. And with few products on the market, farmers don't have the benefits of different companies competing with each other to try to increase product quality. Moving on to the private sector and insurance companies on the next slide. Let's see. So for the private sector, there are risks for the companies and products immediately. There's reputational risks, not for just the agricultural insurance products, but for all products. If they're partnering with other companies or institutions for bundling or distribution, that puts those companies at risk for the impacts of low product performance as well. False negatives miss opportunities to demonstrate value. False positives, as I said, can increase premiums and price potential customers out of the market. For the market as a large, there are currently limited incentives for quality because it can be more costly for quality products. So without that competition and without any external enforcement, the incentives may be limited. This can also lead to unfair competition from inferior products, since it can be cheaper to make low quality products. And that may ruin the market for future high quality products. In the past, we've seen payments made when products fail to trigger according to the contract design. When those payments occur in this way, it can impede client understanding and it may drive companies out of the market, which we've seen before. And when companies leave these markets right after payments are made, that can further deteriorate trust in the companies and the products. Next slide. Looking at the insurance regulatory sector, insurance is now being recognized as in the sphere of insurance regulators after some debate in some places. And there are two different ways to think about this. The first is consumer protection and product safety, and clearly defining these factors of quality, approving, monitoring. But sometimes there's a limitation of on-staff specialized technical capacity. And even when capacity development efforts are made, there are limited staff availability, so smaller staffs, and high turnover of staff, which can make it hard. And then in market development, regulators also have this tension between wanting to allow creativity and innovation while also protecting both consumers and businesses, including from unfair competition that can limit the market development. There's also a challenge in that there might be inconsistencies in standards and expectations for companies across markets, across countries, that may make it hard for companies that work across these markets to transfer successful products in different markets. Next slide. Finally, government and donors. So for government that is in particular those applying subsidies, there are competing budget demands. So knowing the value of the expenditure on subsidies is really important. Also, it's important to think about with low quality products that don't perform very well, if heavy subsidies are applied, who is really benefiting? In the end, the benefits aren't really being transferred to the farmers in this case, but rather it's subsidizing the company to deliver what may be low quality products that can actually do more harm than good. For donors and for government alike, there are difficulties also comparing investment options in terms of combating poverty, building growth opportunities, and disaster risk finance more generally. Dollar for donors, we see that risk financing may be more effective than emergency disaster response, but that's predicated on the products working well. High impact development efforts, we see donors being able to lift people out of poverty only to have shocks push them back down. So there's a great need to offer protection to prevent descents back into poverty. Low quality products are essentially taking limited funds from farmers through the premium expenditures. And then that only deepens the crisis with crop loss. Difficulty comparing investment options again. Essentially for government and donors, the key point I would recommend taking away is that it's absolutely essential that public funds are well spent and that you do no harm with these products. Next slide. So I'll go to the next slide after this. One of the things we've been working on is certification. So we've actually seen precedent for certification elsewhere. Starting in the United States, for example, there's been industry-led certification standards. While assessing fire risks for the World's Fair in Chicago in 1893, an electrical engineer proposed an idea to create a testing laboratory. The initial funding for this actually came from an underwriters association and insurance union, demonstrating a private sector-led commitment to safety standards. Became Underwriter Laboratories, or UL. UL now sets and tests quality standards for billions of products worldwide to protect both industry and consumers, demonstrating precedent for some kind of certification in this area, including industry-led certification possibly. Next slide. So at University of California, Davis, we've been partnering with the Nairobi-based Regional Center for Mapping of Resources for Development, or RCMRD, to refine, measure, and certify index insurance quality in East Africa. And this is a pilot that we're doing in Ethiopia, Tanzania, Uganda, and Kenya. So QUIC, as we call it, pairs insurance index and household data with statistical and economic quality measurements to certify that an index insurance product will, at a minimum, not cause harm. The certification process can help provide some analytical capacity that may be lacking at other institutions. And the idea is that after this, certified products can include quick branding and marketing in its efforts, not unlike the UL example I just mentioned. This independent, rigorous third-party analysis can provide information to enable all stakeholders, including farmers, donors, government, to make better decisions for themselves, their organizations, about increasingly complex products. Also, lessons learned from other agricultural inputs, in this case, fertilizers, suggest that farmers who are suspicious of product quality that they cannot observe, when presented with credible independent verification of quality and of the unobservable characteristics, can actually dramatically increase farmer willingness to pay, which provides us with some optimism that perhaps this kind of credible information input to farmers will help further develop the market. Next slide. So I want quickly to mention what QUIC does and what it does not do. So QUIC essentially is testing whether, based on the price and performance, farmers will at a minimum not be worse off for having purchased the product. QUIC also tries to identify opportunities for the design improvements and cost reduction that can be integrated in the product design and retested if there's space or need for improvement. Right now, QUIC allows stakeholders to determine the best way to use the certification in their own work, how they interpret and apply the certification. And I'm looking forward to hearing our stakeholder panel talk about how they view this and think it might be best applied. I want to just quickly mention that there are limitations to this. Quick does not consider issues such as timeliness of payouts, method of payment, timing of sales, requirements for agent training, and other implementation issues. There are some great resources out there to look at these issues, including the ILO UC Davis collaboratively designed 3D client value assessment tool. But these are really important critical issues, but they're outside of the scope of Quick. I thought that bared mentioning. Also, I want to mention that Quick certification also doesn't necessarily mean that a farmer should buy the contract. There are a lot of other factors, including individual preferences, that can and should whether insurance purchase is the right decision for them. Next slide. So in terms of requirements, for a product to be certified, it requires certain information inputs in the process, including the historical index values, historical yield data, which we know data can be a huge issue, but there are some approaches to data collection that can be used. It needs information about product program costs, premiums, and expected payouts. As a product goes through the process, possible outcomes include that it can be accepted as certifiable and be marketed with Quick branding. Also, there's a possibility that it might not be certified as meeting quality standards. In this case, the certifying institution, RCMRD in this case, can identify opportunities to reduce costs and implementation, which might allow it to meet standards of value for cost. It can also potentially help identify innovative contract designs to improve product performance, in which case, once these changes are made, it can be tested again for certification issues. Next slide. So this last chart is quite large and complex. On the left side in the gray area, it essentially summarizes the information inputs and how it's used to calculate whether or not farmers will be worse off on average with a product. On the right, however, you'll see that, as I was discussing, if the contract is deemed not meet these standards, there's an opportunity for redesign, which loops up to the two blue boxes in terms of using new technologies to enhance contract design or looking for new approaches that might be able to reduce costs to address some of these issues. I want to mention also, as I wrap up, to hand to my panelists, that for more information on the technical components of the certification and how it's actually conducted, there was a presentation last year at ICII that I recommend going back and viewing for these more technical issues. Here we want to orient towards better understanding stakeholder perspectives and how these certifications might be used. But I recommend going back and looking at that as well. With that, I want to pass to my first panelist representing the private sector. Sorry, if we can move forward a slide. I want to start by passing on to Hassan Bashir for his perspective and how he thinks it might be used in his sector and his work.
Thank you, Tara. Yeah, let me just get that up. Thank you for the opportunity and thanks for the excellent presentation on the Quick certification system. My name is Hassan Bashir. I am from the insurance industry in Kenya. I have been involved with index insurance, especially livestock insurance, for the last 10 years or so. Besides that, I was the CEO of an insurance company that was one of the pioneers of the product in terms of introduction of the product to the market in northern Kenya. This is the index-based livestock insurance product. So my experience is limited to that market, but I have been involved with the development generally in the region and still involved in the discussion on the scaling of this product across the Horn of Africa and the Sahel region. And so I think for a brief background, that is me. I come from Kenya, live and work in Nairobi. Thank you.
So Hassan, if you could please give us some insights into how you see some of the issues you've seen in the sector related to these issues I've described with certification and product performance, and then also maybe give your thoughts on, based on your observations and experiences, the role certification might have in the sector and how you think it might be perceived and used.
Thank you. I believe certification is important. It's something that has been missing so far, at least in my region and in my experience. I believe both in the crop as well as the livestock insurance. There are, of course, also other products in that space, sovereign products. So I believe certification has been missing. There was hardly any way of knowing whether the product meets certain basic minimums. And having that, some of the descriptions you've made really is lacking. As you probably all know, and the participants know, this is a developing product. We rolled out in northern Kenya about 10 years ago as asset replacement product, and then later on developed into asset protection products. And part of that change resulted from the inability of the product to hold on the ground with customers, whether it's pricing or the different aspects of the product. So I believe certification will play a significant role. We all know that the industry, the insurance industry, may not be well placed to, question and certify this product. Perhaps even the regulators have not thought very hard and long about it. One reason for that has been the industry, the community, the regulators needed to try something out. This is a new area. No one had, the foundation about it, especially the insurance industry. So there was need to really try this out and see how it works. So that, of course, has the effect of, an aspect of trial and error. So 10 years into this, I think, assessing and measuring the quality of products and how they perform is critical. It's about the right time. We are at a stage now where the region in the Horn of Africa is talking about scaling across 8 countries, the ICII countries. And I'm sure there are discussions around across the Sahel. So I think this discussion, the qualification, the certification is, the quality certification is coming at the right time, in line with the discussion right now to scale it up across the African continent.
Great, thank you. I'll now pass to get some perspective from the insurance regulator. Cynthia, if you want to introduce yourself and provide some comments.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. Good evening. So my name is Cynthia Aaron Sumuga, and I work with the insurance regulator in Uganda. I'm the officer in charge of the agricultural insurance. The agricultural insurance scheme, looking at the subsidy part especially. And yes, we as a country, of course, are very interested in seeing how we can improve on our product management and the like. And we have been working with UC Davis to see how we can get a certification for our products, because we started our agriculture scheme in 2016. It is now 2021, and we have over 300,000 farmers registered who have at least been part of, well, partaken of agriculture insurance. So seeing that the numbers are growing and we have this product rolling out there, it's very important that we have a way of seeing their quality and understanding it. Now, this also is derived from our index insurance regulations, which came into force last year in 2020. When you look at section 4 of these regulations, they speak about having triggers, having triggers and having alternative methods, especially for the index products, which puts us in a position as a regulator of also having something to verify what these indices are and what is a proposed outcome. Is it going to be suitable? Is it going to do no harm to our customers? So that is why we've been participating with the UC Davis on this, and so far so good. We look forward to seeing this rolled out, and eventually would like to see what the result is for our products, and also adopt it as a regulator to ensure that we have quality products out there, especially for something as sensitive as agriculture insurance dealing with smallholder farmers. Thank you, Tara.
Okay, next I'd like to introduce Tom. Well, I'll allow Tom to introduce himself, but I'd love to hear your thoughts from the government perspective. Tom?
Thank you very much, Tara and the team, for inviting me to join this discussion. My name is Tom Dienya. I work in Kenya Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries. I am part of the team implementing the crop insurance program, which started way back in 2015. And now we are covering about 37. We are covering 37 counties. Counties are like districts in some countries. So the smaller units of the country. The government is promoting what is called area yield index insurance. And this is insurance for crops, whereby the most important requirement is that for each county, we go there and delineate smaller units with similar features of rainfall, altitude, soil fertility. We call them homogeneous zones. And the belief is that for each homogeneous zone, the farmers there are the same, and the historical average yield is the same. The varieties are the same, so historical average yield is the same. And that historical average yield is the one used as a basis to insure the farmers. Simply stated that the farmer in a homogeneous unit with a particular yield figure, if they go into production and that year they produce more than the historical average yield, then that is a good year, there's no compensation. But if they produce less than the historical average yield, then that year is bad, they are due for compensation. So the biggest challenge here is how you carefully delineate these homogeneous zones, because they are the basis of the starting point of the basis risk. If you don't delineate them properly, you can have farmers in different zones mixed together. And at that point, the product that you'll come up with will either favor some farmers and leave out some farmers, because you did not properly delineate the homogeneous zones. The second issue is about the data, historical data, what we are calling the average yield for each zone. Again, if you don't get it properly, you may have put farmers together with the historical yield, which is definitely not theirs. And by the time they buy the product, then they end up either benefiting or missing because they have historical yield that does not correspond to their actual historical yield. So I'm happy I've been part of the discussion on this quality, trying to improve quality of the area yield index. We're excited to find out how this can happen. The government, as you know, is keen to ensure that all farmers are assisted equally. And assistance here is in terms of giving subsidy to the farmers. the arrangement is that when a farmer buy a product per acre, whether it's a product of maize per acre, the government pays half the subsidy and the farmer pays half the subsidy. And because the focus is supporting the small scale farmer, we are focusing on farmers with as little land areas, half an acre and a maximum of 20 acres, where for each acre, the government gives half the value of the subsidy. So the government is a very strong stakeholder in trying to find out how do we come up with quality products which does not disadvantage some farmers. At the same time, how do we cover all the farmers in all parts of the country? As you may expect, the insurance companies would be very keen to go to counties with very, very limited challenges and not going to some countries they know historically have challenges of weather and all that. So, but the government is keen to make sure that they cover all parts of the country and all farmers are treated equally with respect to subsidy. So the idea of having a quality process parameter is going to be very interesting for us to ensure that we try to refine these products and make sure that the farmers are paid properly. And this would help to improve the value of the products and address some of the challenges we face from time to time, where some farmers complain they have not been paid when they're supposed to be paid. It is important to note that there are two issues here. The products are developed by the insurance companies, and we normally expect them to be as innovative as possible. So the team that is dealing with the quality parameter will have to be always in the lookout of these innovations and how they bring up those quality parameters for each innovative product. Our goal is to help them to have as many products as possible. The second issue is about the understanding of the product. It is important that the farmer understand the product clearly, and also when you say quality, then they also understand the quality parameters. So there has to be a way of going to tell the farmers how this is done. And then finally, we have the regulator, the insurance regulator. In law, is the regulator that is supposed to approve the product. The insurance companies can explain to us the product, how it works, but it's the regulator who is supposed to say that this is okay, approved. So there has to be a way of involving the regulator in this process of quality development and putting it within the legal framework to ensure that it is part of their way of approving a product to take into account the quality parameters. So this is a good discussion, and we're looking forward to see what is going to come out of this and help us as we expand this new horizon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. Now I want to address the donor's perspective. As we know, a lot of agricultural insurance products still remain by and large reliant on donors. So I'm happy to have Jen Cisse here to provide some insights from her perspective. Jen.
Thanks so much. Hi, my name's Jen Cisse. I am currently the Senior Research Manager at the Munich Climate Insurance Initiative, which is hosted by the UN University Institute for Environment and Human Security. In my previous position, I was the Senior Risk Manager for USAID, working specifically on this portfolio and working very closely with UC Davis on this project. I should just mention that I no longer work for USAID, and I'm speaking just in my personal capacity and not representing the views of the US government. But also that, you know, in my previous life, I was studying applied economics, and really a lot of what I will speak about comes from a focus on the well-being of people and trying to ensure we're promoting resilient livelihoods, which is, I think, ultimately what donor investments are hoping to accomplish. So I'd like to start by just addressing what I personally think about quality certification more broadly. I think that this is a really exciting time for insurance, specifically disaster and climate risk insurance, and disaster risk finance more broadly. We see a lot of energy and excitement and innovation in this space. And that's really positive, I think, and is allowing us to explore lots of new options for helping individuals around the world, particularly those in climate exposed and low income countries, to better manage their risk. At the same time, we want to make sure that these products that are being developed all over the place are actually protecting people. And so as I mentioned, I think our primary focus is making sure, as Tara really well highlighted, that there isn't a high level of product failure, because in that case, rather than trying to help people address risk, we're just adding another layer of risk, which is exactly the opposite of what we're trying to accomplish. So yeah, I think on the one hand, quality certification is critically important to making sure that these new innovative solutions are protecting clients. At the same time, from a donor perspective, this is about taxpayer accountability, and we do not want to be supporting the development or distribution of products that are not effective and efficient. So I think, from both of those sides, donors really care in making sure that these products are high quality. Also, just in terms of investment, the better the products are, the more impacts we're going to see on resilience, increasing resilient livelihoods, and allowing insurance clients to make really informed and productive investments in their agricultural livelihoods, which is the ultimate goal. So those are the reasons why I think that quality certification is really important. And I'm so excited to have been involved in the creation of this project. Now, how do I think it will actually help donors to have certification processes? I think that on the one hand, by identifying high quality products, by certifying them, that will allow donors to invest in the best solutions. So we can clearly make a distinction between what are high quality products and what aren't, and what products deserve investment from either governments or donors or others who are interested in supporting climate resilience. We also want to be, as donors and as those involved kind of in the international disaster risk finance and climate insurance space, we want to push for quality and innovation. And this means also including, also pushing the private sector to really, come up with the most innovative, but also effective and high quality products. So by supporting quality certification, I think that allows us to really set a standard and say, this is what the international community is interested in. And if you are not able to make a high quality product, we're not going to support you. And going back to what we discussed earlier, I think that it's really important for allowing donors to use resources wisely. I think Tara mentioned earlier that ultimately we would like to decrease the amount of resources that are needed for disaster response, particularly disaster response for food security challenges that are the result of agricultural failures. If there are more cost-effective solutions that can allow individuals to invest in their farms to increase their yields and productivity in good times, and then to feel that level of protection when they need it. So yeah, I wanted to mention briefly that in my capacity at ICII, I'm involved in a lot of work around the importance of research and evidence generation and learning more broadly in increasing the quality and impact of climate and disaster risk finance and insurance. And so I think that this initiative really highlights what research and data can do to improve the quality of these different solutions. and also highlights how there can sometimes be a gap in quality and why it's important to identify those solutions that are highest quality and most cost effective in order to ultimately create the transformation that we're looking for to increase the resilience of people who are highly affected by and impacted by climate and disaster risk. So that's why I think that these quality certification broadly and these types of investments to really understand the quality and impact of different disaster risk finance solutions generally are really critical in helping donors as they navigate and invest in this space. Just to turn quickly to some potential stumbling blocks, I think that as was highlighted and Tara said, we're not going to really talk about the technical issues here. Certification can be incredibly technically complex, and I think that it needs to be really clear what the process is that those who are creating solutions and those who are supporting investing in solutions can undertake in order to get their products certified. And this includes being transparent about the data needs, which I know in some contexts, there may be additional data collection that's necessary. And in some contexts, the products aren't even being designed necessarily with this type of data in mind. So this is one thing I'd really like to maybe push the certification team to think a little bit more about how these certification processes can be expanded to meet the needs of donors, governments, and the private sector, as well as clients who are purchasing or investing in non-agricultural insurance, for example, related to climate, related to natural resource management. So I hope we get a chance to talk about that, and I'll turn back over to Tara for now.
Thank you, Jen. That was really helpful. And just as we transition to a more open conversation, one of the things I want to mention is that we've been, as the University of California starts to pilot this, there are two things I want to mention. First of all, this is a pilot and we are still figuring out some of the details of how this works. Most importantly, what we're still trying to figure out in consultation with the stakeholders is the best way that this should be applied or enforced. For example, we've heard different people we've talked to have had different perspectives on whether or not it should be a requirement of a regulator for any parametric or index insurance products, whether it should be a precondition for subsidies and qualifying for subsidies, whether it's a precondition for donor investment, whether it's just an information input among many others rather than a specific condition, whether it should be an industry-led standard, where the industry is pushing itself to do this to protect the market and the industry and to advance the marketing for their products. So I'm interested to hear all of your perspectives on what are some of the opportunities for how this might best be used or applied in your work, or where do you see it playing a role most significantly in terms of having impacts on your work? Jen, do you want to go ahead and get started? You started alluding to this a little bit, so I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I'm happy to comment on that. I mean, as I mentioned, I no longer work for a donor, but in my personal opinion, I think that it would be excellent if all donor investments in this space require certification. I think that that is obviously would allow for the creation of solutions that aren't certified, but I think when it comes to making sure that the donor community is living up to their imperative to do no harm, and also ensuring accountability for their taxpayer resources, while also trying to push the space to be really high quality. I think that really it's critical that donors support certification, and to the extent that it's feasible, and you mentioned that this is only a pilot, but to the extent that the learnings from this pilot activity allow us to say that these are the types of products that absolutely require certification, I think that that would be a benefit for the entire climate and disaster risk finance and insurance community.
Great, thank you, Jen. I guess next, Tom, since I know the government of Kenya does apply a lot of subsidies, I'm interested to hear from your perspective, how might certification from a independent third party best in your work or from your perspective be applied or enforced?
Independent third party doing certification and standardization. We need to understand the implication in terms of the cost. Will it imply that it is the government to meet the cost of this third party doing the certification, or will it be the cost to be met by the insurance companies as a part of improving their products? That needs to come out clearly so that if it is the government to meet the cost of certification, then we know that beside the subsidy that we are paying, then we'll have another cost element in terms of paying the third party doing the certification. But again, you need to also get it from the side of the regulator, who by law is the one mandated to declare the product is safe or not. And the safety of the product for the farmers, the citizens to adopt, we're assuming that it will have taken care of the certification process. Again, we need to understand how the regulator will come in here, whether they'll be the ones to be
I think we're having a little bit of a difficulty with Tom's connection, unless it's just me.
so the cost of certification.
Oh, there we go.
I'm saying that it will be important for us to be very clear on who will meet the cost of certification and pay the third party responsible for the certification. Of course, I see here a chance for this third party being used, getting jobs, but the details of how it will be done.
Okay, thank you, Tom. So as Tom started alluding to and discussing, this ultimately falls to the regulator in terms of quality assurances. So I'd like to talk to Cynthia a little bit. Cynthia, in terms of how a certification from your perspective might best be applied, used, enforced, I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
So when it comes to certification, we have to first follow the processes that happen. For example, in our setting, when an insurer goes out to design a product with donors or themselves or with the other intermediaries, usually that product has to come to a regulator. And we at the side of regulation, we review this product, we look at its terms and conditions, and then we have to make an assessment on whether it's going to be, on whether the customer is fully protected, are all the laws being followed and the like. So when it comes to this particular process, it's quite intense, and we go through quite a number of assessments. A number of departments have to look at it. We have the actuaries look at it. We have the financial analysts look at it. We have the technical experts look at it before this product can roll out. So having something like certification would actually enhance our understanding, because at this we would be able to understand some of the other requirements that come with a product. For example, their projections. For example, is the rate okay? For example, if someone has brought this new product and they've done their market research, does it tally, does it tie in together? So having that other eye onto this product would be beneficial to us as the regulator as well. And like I said, for us, when it comes to index products, we expect you to have not just one method, but at least two methods of claims of assessment. if the trigger doesn't work, what is your alternative method? What's your alternative computation? So if we have certification in place, it would help us improve on our judgment when it comes to some of these issues. So as a regulator, having certification would be key, because it's just another layer of protection, and it's something else that we can, at least put in our due diligence as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Cynthia. Hassan, I'm interested to hear from the private sector perspective and all of your work in the insurance industry around index insurance. How might this be adopted by the private sector, and are there stumbling blocks? How do you see this being received more broadly by the private sector?
Thank you, Tara. I think the private sector is, if I can break it into insurers and non-insurers. Insurers are those who are either carrying the risk or intermediating and so on. And there are also quite a number of other companies, especially in the technology sector, that are interested in the distribution and so on, aggregation and all that, who are not necessarily risk carriers, but are in this space. So for insurers, I think they will be interested to have a product that is certificated and approved by the regulators, for which an underwriter may not be blamed if things don't work the way we want, the way things are supposed to be, especially given the fact that this is a new knowledge area, and in many insurance companies, the basic underwriting capacity has not been in this area. I must say it's a growing area. There's a lot of development and training in this space, but what we have right now is a situation where many companies are looking at the product and saying, okay, with the question of basis risk and so on. So the feeling I have is that if regulators came in, provided a certified minimum viable product was certified, then insurers will feel more comfortable, scaling this to the market and delivering that service and paying claims on it, and not paying when the system says don't pay. We have situations right now, and I did a note on the chart, where the current season trigger has been announced in northern Kenya, and insured units that have not triggered have had significant losses, which is not supposed to be. So we are scratching our head and saying, is it a contract failure? Is it a design problem? Is there other aspects that cause that kind of loss of hard in a unit that has not triggered for payout? So if this were a product that was certified by Kenya's Insurance Regulatory Authority, we'll simply say, we have designed, we have been checked, we have been approved, we are correct, and we'll move on. That doesn't mean you don't look at the design again. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is that there are quite a number of innovations and technologies developing, especially in the very, very difficult area of distribution in rural, remote areas. And some of these systems would like to onboard certified products that have been approved by the system, so that what you onboard and is available on the system is not a guesswork. So in both of those cases, I think it will be useful to have certification or quality certification, at least the minimum quality certification. Thank you. I don't know if I've answered or deviated.
No, I think that's great. That was super helpful to have that perspective. And some of the questions coming up in the chat or in the Q&A are quite interesting. The first one I want to first pose to Jen and Cynthia, but I'd be happy to hear everybody's opinion. So Tom and Hassan, please also feel free to chime in with your perspective. But if you could talk a little bit about the role of certification and minimum standards related to running the danger of playing it safe and not trying out different things, and kind of that tension between wanting to have certain standards set while also allowing for innovation and supporting that, either allowing it as a regulator, Cynthia, for you, but Jen, in terms of investments you're making to try to balance that innovation and need for safety standards. I don't know who'd rather go first. Or Cynthia?
Definitely there's the issue of whether we are allowing a lot of innovation, but when it comes to index insurance, that is already high-end innovation for us here. We're talking satellites, we're talking NDVIs. Many of us don't even know what some of those terminologies are at the end of the day. So as a regulator, we've tried to get a number of approaches towards this. For example, for index insurance to run in Uganda, we had to give it a trial period. We had to say, okay, let's see what will come out of this. So even as a regulator, we still have the leeway. Much as we will have the certification, it's by no means a way of strangling innovation. If it comes to us as a regulator and we look at it and maybe it's beyond what we've seen, it's something totally new to us, we have room to allow you to pilot it, for example. And we do allow for some of these pilot periods to see how it goes. Does it fit within what the frameworks we already have in place? Is it outside our frameworks? And if it's outside our frameworks, how do we look at it differently? Continuing on the same issue, as a regulator, we now have a sandbox where we allow all kinds of creations to run. So we've tried to put in a number of environments where we can accommodate even these innovations that are quite out of this world for most of us. So certification wouldn't necessarily chalk it out. It would be something we'd look at and say, okay, maybe what we have under certification is not accommodating all this or accommodates all this, and would allow for, those trial periods before we apply the full law. Thank you, Tara.
Thanks, Cynthia. Jen?
Yeah, I think that's great, Cynthia. And just to build on that, and I agree totally, just to build on that, I mean, I think we need to make a distinction between innovation and quality, right? And so I think exactly as Cynthia said, this will not and is not meant to stifle innovation. I'm sure Cynthia would still be really interested in discussing how can you bring in, perhaps a credit component? How can banks be involved? How can there be a savings component? Which different types of distribution networks can we work through? How can different products be combined and bundled? There's a lot of room for innovation, and there are a lot of people who are innovating. But what we're talking about here is when you're innovating, you still need to have an index. You still need to use parameters that will not hurt people. So if you're going to have a parametric component, we need to have some assurances that that parametric component is not equivalent to playing the lottery for clients. And so I think really this is not saying there isn't a ton of room up here to innovate. We're saying there's a floor, and if you don't meet this floor, we're not going to allow you to we're not going to regulate the product, or as a donor, we're not going to invest in the product. And on the flip side, telling clients that, look, these products, they're trying different things. There might be a pilot component to bundle. There might be a new savings add-on, or, some other non-agricultural health insurance that you can purchase. But this component of your agricultural insurance, you can choose whether to buy it or not, but we can tell you that we think it's a safe product. I think that's the distinction that we're talking about. I think there was another question just related to this about the waiting time for this. And I understand that could be really frustrating, not being able to put a product out while waiting for it to be certified. But at the same time, we already do that with regulations. So I think just making sure that these processes are well aligned, and once we're out of the pilot stage and maybe have processes that are well defined and clear, that can help speed up the process so that it could happen at the same time as regulation, so that there's no additional delay.
Great, thanks. Hassan or Tom, if you have any additional thoughts in this area, please do chime in.
No, I'm good. I think well answered.
Okay, great. So one of the other questions that came in is regarding that the certification process will indeed involve some level of cost, and who should bear the cost of such a certification. Traditionally, in a lot of standards in the United States, such as safety standards that electronics won't catch on fire easily, for example, that's something that is borne by the private sector company and the producer of those products. However, given the pilot nature of this and given the need to, the overall underwriting or support that this industry is receiving externally outside of the private sector, what is your perspective on starting these activities around certification and who should bear the costs as this starts to become more normalized as a process? Is that something that donors subsidize, for example, in an attempt to help encourage it and allow for this to start going off? Is this something that's supported by the private sector themselves? So I'm interested to hear your thoughts on how this can best start to be applied, including who should bear the costs of it. So Hassan, do you maybe want to start from your perspective as a private sector company? How do you best see this getting started in terms of who should bear the costs of this certification process, and what are the implications of that?
Okay. Well, of course, we lack the what the cost will be as a private company, profit motivated private company. We will normally add value and add their cost and then transfer that to the consumer. That's the natural way. It's just a straight line. And if that makes us more competitive and we cannot sell the product with that value addition, we may, if regulation allows us, leave it, drop it out, and if the product can sell without that. But in this case, we don't have the benefit of what it will cost. For example, we're talking about a product that will cost 0.5 of a dollar in a year as a premium. So what the disadvantage we have is, is the certification a one-off? Is it something that will continue? Is it annual? Is it? And so it's possible that if it is a one-off cost, that industry will find a way to add that and not necessarily make the product prohibitively costly for the consumer. So I think quite a lot of clarity has to come out. But there's no doubt that approval by the regulator will be needed, and that usually comes as a form of certification. That happens for every product. By the way, your car insurance has been approved by the regulator. We can't sell any without your travel has been approved. Normally it will come in the form of a letter you file, and you can't sell a product that has not been approved in the market. So we should not here sound like we're doing something completely new. We're not doing anything new. It's just that in this case, we may have a situation where the regulator may have looked away rather than find a way to approve it. And I think that's not a long-term solution. Go ahead, let's see how it works. We are looking at you. If it works, we will look at it. I think that may have been so far the regulator's way of looking at this. That has a shelf life. Sooner or later, there will be some mess, and industry cannot handle that, and the regulator wouldn't want to deal with a mess. They rather approve the product upfront. So I think quality certification is critical for this product going forward.
Great, thank you, Hassan. Tom, I'm interested to hear your thoughts from the government perspective. As somebody who participates a lot in Kenya in particular, there's a lot of subsidization of the agricultural insurance market and the index insurance market. I'm interested to hear your thoughts about who should bear the costs of certification and where that responsibility lies. Tom?
Now, if we say that the insurance companies will bear the cost of certification, what Hassan has said is the usual principle. They'll push down the cost either to the consumer, and in this case, the consumer could either be individual farmers or it could be the government that is helping the farmers to the subsidy. What I've seen happening is that the regulator approved what is called area yield index on the basis that this product is comparing the actual yield vis-a-vis the historical yield of a well-defined homogeneous zone. So that approval was given and they don't go back to approve again, so long as the product is confined to that. But practically every season, there is a new product because every season for each homogeneous zone, there's a change in the data. The change in the data comes because as you compile the historical average yield based on the crop cuts, then historically the data keeps changing. If you knock out earlier, if you are working on 10-year basis, and each year you are having a new data for that new year, so the product is changing, and the insurance companies come with a new product for each homogeneous zone each year and each season. So it will be interesting to know whether this cost is applied for a one-off process, one-off in the sense that the certification is applying to a one-off product, describing that product is paid one-off, or it will be applicable every time the farmer is buying a product that is aligned to what was approved by the regulator at once. So there's a lot to be discussed here. If the certification will be done every year for every product, then probably the cost will be higher, and we need to find out who is supposed to meet that cost. If it is a one-off process, maybe again we'll see the cost and see who should meet that cost. From the government perspective, depending on the nature of the cost, we can look around, because even right now, a lot of support we are giving the insurance companies because of their capacity. If it is something that we can put in our budget and say this is a simple thing compared to the total amount we are paying for the subsidy, we just say this is going to be part of the subsidy element, a one-off thing we paid for it. Or if the insurance companies say this is a very small thing, it doesn't make big difference, they will take care of it. Again, we can see that and see who can pay for it. So I think the decision on whether the government, who should pay for it, requires some details on whether it will be a one-off process or a continuous thing, and the value, the actual costing of that certification, whether it will be too huge or something very minimal that can be applied. Definitely the government interest is to have farmers accessing insurance as cheaper cost as possible. Currently, the average for crop insurance, the average range farmers are paying is from as minimal as $5 per acre of insured crop, and as the biggest would be maybe $30 per acre. But the range is about $5 to $10 per acre. And the government's interest is that the range should be around there as cheap as possible. So again, if this costing would be distorting this cheap quality requirement for the farmer to pay, again, it's something we're going to discuss and see the consequence of that process. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. That was really insightful. And I see Jen in particular nodding a lot while you're talking. So Jen, I don't know if you want to add on or discuss further before I ask Cynthia the same question.
And I'm really interested in Cynthia's responses to some of Tom's questions, but I think I just broadly agree that, you know, it depends on the details, and as we are interested in kind of supporting innovation and subsidizing a relatively new market, providing public goods, perhaps in terms of a range of things, right? Governments and donors have invested in public goods related to consumer education, you know, data collection. There's a lot of areas where investment is needed in order to make it more feasible for the insurance industry to participate. I think that this is just one of those things that needs to be brought into the conversation when we're talking about subsidies more generally. If the product is already being subsidized by the government or by donors, then, you know, it's important to have that conversation while looking at certification and discussing those costs at the same time. I think donors broadly are very interested in ensuring quality, and therefore investing in this as a nascent kind of industry that can then perhaps find more sustainable financial support, either from industry or primarily from industry or from governments for subsidized products. But yeah, I just I think that that's exactly how to think about it.
Great, thanks, Jen. And Cynthia, I have the same underlying question for you about where these costs should be borne and how. But I also know that Tom made a lot of comments about the role of the regulator, so I'm interested to hear your responses on that as well.
With us as a regulator on who bears the cost, we actually do not ask for any financial consideration to approve products right now. That isn't there. If an insurer wants to bring in the product, we will just let you know what approvals or supports we require, and the product has to come along with those. However, when it comes to certification, if we as a regulator take on the certification role and there's a cost implication to it, definitely it will have to be passed to the insurers, but it has to be a reasonable amount. It's not, we wouldn't really charge something so exorbitant. And it has to be a one-off, or maybe at reviews or something like that. But otherwise, product approval is not something that really carries a cost implication for now. However, when we are done with this exercise, it's a discussion we'll be open to having and seeing how we can factor in any expenses, if any.
Yeah, Jen.
Yeah, and I just wanted to reflect on Tom's point about, and Hassan raised it as well, about whether it is this one-off or whether it needs to change every year with new data. And Cynthia, to confirm my suspicion, which is that basically if the underlying process for calculating the index is not changing, then if it's being updated because of new information, that's fine and wouldn't require the regulator necessarily to take another look to approve the product. And I would think for certification, it would be similar, where as long as, you know, the underlying kind of algorithm isn't changing, there's no need to get new certification.
Yes, Jen. Cynthia, thoughts, response?
Well, usually from the regulatory perspective, every change you make usually has to come in for approval. So if there are any slight changes, we'd still have to look at it. But like I said, it's not something that would maybe require annually if there are no changes or anything like that. And also, certification is not new. Certification is not something terribly new to all of us. As you look at it, even in our individual countries, we have a number of certifications. We have the national certification bodies. So this would just be a vote of confidence, you know, a seal of confidence for the people out there. So yeah, I do think it's something that shouldn't even be expensive in the first place to really discourage anybody.
Great, thanks. Hassan, I see you might have something to add.
Yeah, consumers already pay for the existence of the regulator through addition to the premium collected from consumers. So we already employ them. They work for us. Of course, they supervise us, they license us, all that, but we pay for their existence. That's the fact. Sorry, Cynthia. So that's not, I think, what we are talking about. I think what we are talking about is an additional quality certification, let's say, but like the one proposed by Quick, which is something I'm just thinking aloud. I could be wrong, but perhaps something that the regulator, a standard that has been set by Quick or others that will be applied by the regulators in. So I am at this point, I'm thinking that we're not really talking about what the regulator will charge to, approve a product. We're talking about what the cost of applying that standard will be. I don't know, Tara, am I right? I'm just a little bit.
Yes, yes, that's it.
Yeah. So I think we should have
that's
that.
Absolutely correct.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to clarify.
Yes. And Jen, are you chiming in as well?
Yeah, and I just wanted to, I agree with that. And I think that from a donor perspective, there's a lot of interest investing in pilots like Quick and then working with regulators to determine, is it the regulator who wants to take on this role? And how can donors and government support the capacity strengthening or new staffing or whatever's needed to allow the regulator to take on that role versus is this going to be something that is maybe the regulator is okay with this process, but is outside the regulation process, in which case then donors, if they're requiring it, may be willing to pay for it. So I think that for me is a little bit where we are right now. We're trying to see where does it make sense ultimately for this to sit. But just also when we're thinking about costs, there is a huge cost to bad products, and that cost falls on clients. And so just remembering, and then potentially on ultimately the insurance industry if they can no longer sell products because they have such a bad reputation. So also just remembering that, there are already costs out there. And so we're just trying to make sure that we eliminate the costs of bad products by doing a little bit of investment in quality assurance.
Yeah, Jen, thanks for that reminder. I think that's hugely essential and a kind of a critical way in which we look at it. It's pretty important to us. And as we're talking, I think we're completely correctly focusing quite a lot on consumer protection and minimum standards. But as we were thinking about the role of certification, we also thought about ways that it could help communicate things to potential consumers and help advance the market, which is kind of been going in fits and starts in terms of progressing and expanding the market. So I'm interested to hear all of your perspectives on not just the role certification might play in protecting consumers and protecting donor funds and government funds, but also how it might help contribute, if at all, to growth of this sector. Hassan, maybe do you want to start with your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it definitely will build the confidence, and any confidence builder will have an effect on scaling. This is a product that is tough to scale, very difficult to scale because of nature. We, of course, we all have sometimes even urbanized, well-paid middle-class people have difficulty buying insurance, and so we are bringing a product to rural communities who may never have used it or don't know about it and don't have a lot of resources. Even though that last statement I make is generally not the correct way to look at it. There are plenty of resources out there. And we have seen that it's really worth to protect it for those who understand and who have access. So I think the scale impact of certification will come from the fact that very many insurance companies can take the product to market. Very many intermediary markets across the region can take it to market. And it makes easier for different kind of primary underwriters to undertake and different kinds of reinsurers to carry the risk at the back end. At the moment, it's like putting your hand into a dark pot. You don't know what you'll find in there. Quite a lot of the insurance industry is avoiding it for lack of knowledge or understanding or uncertainty. And I think the more the industry picks up the product and has the confidence to run with it and distribute it through their channel, the more likely that we will achieve scale. And that will only come with understanding and the standard.
Great, thank you. Tom?
Yeah, there's one aspect that we have not talked about, which is very critical in this discussion, and this is the aggregators. For the crop insurance, we have these aggregators who are helping to scale the uptake of products. So you have whether they are cooperative societies, whether they are a group of companies dealing with a set of farmers, 1 acre fund, those big NGOs that are trying to promote agriculture and they're interested in helping their farmers to access insurance and meeting some costs on behalf of those farmers they're interested in. So this, as Hassan has said, the scaling of the sale of products difficult, but the aggregators help us to scale the products. And therefore, they are going to be also very much interested to know the costing of this certification, whether they'll also be going to be required to participate in meeting the cost of the certification. So I was going to forget about that, but it just came to my mind that we need to take into account the role of the aggregators, especially because of the big numbers we require for the insurance, and they're the key players for helping us to achieve these big numbers. Thank you.
Jen or Cynthia, I don't know if you have anything to add either in response to Tom or your thoughts on certification and potential role in market growth.
I would like to pick it from where Hassan had put it, and where he says anything that builds confidence is welcome. As something interesting happens, for example, in this market, the rural farmers are keen to learn. And when they hear about these insurance things, when we go out for awareness drives and the like, you will be amazed at how many phone calls we get with people asking, is this true? Does this exist? Do you know about it? So and so came to my village and said this. Is it true? We get a number of phone calls like those, especially when we have the Agro Consortium out there doing awareness drives, or when we do it ourselves and it's on TV or the radio. We still have a lot of people calling in just to ask, calling our toll-free line to find out if these things are really true. So if we can let them know that, you know what, look at the product and see if it bears this mark, then you'll know it's true. Anything that builds confidence, especially in our settings, is always welcome. Always welcome.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, just to add on to that a bit, I mean, I think these two things are related, and the aggregators, one of the reasons why we work with aggregators is because we hope they are trusted actors. And so that also, to Cynthia's point, is about building confidence. And to the extent that those aggregators are nonprofits that are donor supported, I think it aligns well to have them want to not only build confidence in a product, but to ensure that the product in which they're building confidence is a high quality product. So, you know, I think that it makes sense to support them in any efforts they take on to make sure that the products are certified and high quality. But yeah, I mean, I totally agree with the previous speakers, all three, that, you know, it is one of the key challenges to growth in this area is lack of trust. And it's very hard to trust a product that you have not seen be successful. And so certification is part of that puzzle, and smart subsidies are part of that puzzle, communication, et cetera, just to make sure that people really understand the products, understand the track record of the products, understand the process that the product has gone through to be certified, et cetera.
Okay, great. So we're on the verge of running out of time. So I did quickly from our side, as the running the pilot for certification, want to provide just a quick update. As Cynthia alluded to, we're currently finishing our first certification of a product in Uganda. We're hoping to release more information first to Cynthia and team, but then more broadly about the process, anticipated costs. We, of course, in due diligence, ran the certification over and over again to make sure our measure of quality was in and of itself also quality. So we're looking forward to releasing that information quite soon, which will give us a better idea on how to implement this and hopefully drive the conversation forward more. But in the last 2 minutes here, I wanted to give each speaker about 30 seconds, perhaps, for any final remarks you might have. So Jen, I'll start with you.
Thanks for the opportunity. I think this is really exciting work, and anybody who's involved in the space regarding the scale up of these products, I would just encourage you to remember how important it is to work with potential clients to make sure that we're meeting their needs, and also when talking to government and potential donors to just emphasize how important quality is. It's not about necessarily only reaching a certain number of people, but making sure we're reaching a certain number of people with products that will really help them manage their risk.
Okay, Tom, any final thoughts?
Mine is to say that we all welcome the idea of certification. It is going to improve this young industry, and everybody is bound to benefit. But let's see the costing and the details of practicality of how it's going to be implemented. Hopefully that it will be manageable and sustainable, and we'll all embrace it if it comes to that. And also within the legal framework on certification and the approval by the regulator, so that it is part of the entire process of product development and uptake by farmers. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom. And on that note, to the regulator, Cynthia, any final remarks?
Being better is something that we all strive to be, and from a regulatory perspective, anything that that makes our work better, that improves our services to the public, is always welcome. So certification is something we look forward to, and we do hope it will give us a better say, you know, and also give us something to say that, you know, when you're out there buying insurance, this is the best that we have. We've looked at it comprehensively, you know, anything to build the confidence of our market out there so we can improve on our insurance uptake. So we look forward to finishing this project with you, Tara, and sharing our results with everyone. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Okay, and Hassan, if you could wrap us up with any final thoughts you might have.
Yeah, I think index insurance is still struggling with availability, both at the level of the insurance industry as well as the clients. This is still a specialized product that scientists and index experts and actuaries have to work out and calculate and, you know, carve and create, you know, insured units. Many market players are still unable to deal with it. So my hope is that certification, quality certification will make it possible for this product to be available on a large scale easily. There are quite a lot of either system aggregators or communities like the ones Jennifer and Tom were talking about, available to sell it, intermediary markets and so on. So I hope that this development will make it possible for this product to be available on a large scale across the African continent, at least in the ASAL. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, and thank you to all of our panelists. I look forward to working with all of you as we move forward in this process. Dirk, I don't know if you have any closing remarks for us.
Thank you, Tara. All I can do is thank you and the panelists for that very interesting session. I would also like to remind the participants that we spoke about that topic also last year, so you can go on last year's conference and look at the re-recording. I just have what Jen said in my ear, eliminating bad products by investing a little bit in quality assurance. I hope that would become a reality soon. I think it's still a long way to go. I would like to see how the actual implementation would look like, but it's definitely needed. We need better understanding of index insurances. We need better trust in index insurance. Because index insurance has lots of advantages and we need to get rid of the disadvantages. So thanks to everyone, and lunchtime now. I hope to see you back at 2 p.m. when we discuss whether insurance will be more inclusive in the post-pandemic era. Thank you and see you soon.